Today's episode is brought to you by WellPleasedAV. Importer Mark Sosa has hand-selected a remarkable collection of high-performance, high-value brands like Vinnie Rossi, Inuos, Lindenberg, QLN, Qualiton, Rhythm, Gigawatt, and more that are all driven by a passion for excellence in reproducing music effortlessly and naturally. Check out everything WellPleasedAV has to offer by visiting www.wellpleasedav.com. That's wellpleasedav.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by Sonus Faber. Fine, handcrafted loudspeakers designed and manufactured in Vicenza, Italy. With over 35 years of advanced technological research and development, Sonus Faber's elegant designs will allow you to experience an emotional connection with your music like never before. Discover your local dealer at sonusfaber.com. That's SONUSFABER.com. Hey everybody, thank you so much for joining a very special...
Special.
You
never give me your money.
Episode...
Hunter, I want your money maker. That's all it is.
Season 3, Episode 3. We're going to have a big doubleheader here. We're going to get to our interview in a little bit, but first, we're going to discuss the new Beatles Abbey Road Super Deluxe version.
50-year anniversary, baby.
Probably, maybe one of the greatest albums ever to some.
It's a masterpiece, if you ask me.
It's got a lot of good songs. It's one of those albums where you just don't need to skip a song ever. How often do you say that these days?
Well, never, because they don't make albums anymore. Honestly, they don't. So that's why this went to number 1 in the album chart, because they're like, oh, an album. Someone released one.
Oh, a full album.
A full
This
album.
is so crazy. I forget what these are like.
Let's put this at number 1.
On the album chart, it was the only one. Number
The
one.
only
one. I also want to thank our sponsor, Mark Sosa. He's got a great collection of stuff, and I've got a chance to hear him at a lot of shows. He actually is going to be at another audio show coming up, the Capitol Audio Fest, November 1 through 3 in Rockville, Maryland. The Hilton, Washington, D.C., Rockville Hotel Executive Meeting Center. They always have so many lines in the title, don't they? I just saw him at Rocky Mountain Audio Fest. He had QLN Prestige 3 SE, partnered with Vinnie Rossi, L2I SE, and it was sounded saucy. Saucy. Good. That being good. It sounded good,
good
friends.
saucy. Yep.
It was very good saucy, like a great marinara. Bees, do you like a great marinara?
I do. Jones Hollywood. Best
It's good there. The meatballs.
The meatballs. Served right in a frying pan.
And then what do you get for appetizer there, Bees?
Oh, the artichoke. Hello.
It's the only thing. It's
So
delightful.
good. Steamed.
Check him out at Capitol Audio Fest in room 528. He'll be there with Vinnie Rossi once again. Sure to be a good time. So swing by, say hi, and tell him the top sent you. T.O.P. Before we get into the Beatlemania, I just want to crack off some news. We did just come back from Rocky Mountain Audio Fest.
Crushed it.
And it was kind of interesting. Nice venue, good time. You can check out that entire podcast with Scott Hull of Part-Time Audiophile, the editor over there, and the host of the network that hosts this show. And we high-cap all the highlights. We could run down the top 10 list with some of the other writers. So there's tons of info if you want to kind of get a firm recap of what happened at that show. But just a couple of highlights came out of that. Bees, can you do the news ticker?
Oh. I'm like, am I supposed to read something? News. I'm like looking through the notes. What am I supposed to read?
Oh, there's a new budget Focal speaker line called Chora, replacing the chorus line. Starts with a two-way Chora 806 stand mounts for 800 pair. Loudspeakers still constructed in the facilities in Focal's home of France. There's new driver tech for the line, and it goes all the way up to the 826 floor stander, 1,600 a pair. So that's like a budget kind of line that just came out. Also a budget line, a new Andrew Jones. He doesn't sound like that, folks. Sorry I did that impression, but you know how he's
That's
British.
exactly how he sounds.
He does not sound, I think he sounds proper London. That was like Oliver Twist I just did or something like that. He's got a new reference line. It looks a little bit sexier than the previous debut lines, because the debut reference line got new kind of exterior aesthetics. Satin white baffle, stripped oak vinyl wrap cabinet, or satin black baffle with dark walnut vinyl wrap cabinet. That's a November release, and also $500 a pair.
Coming out in November.
Yeah. So it looks pretty sexy. I think sexier than some of the other lines down there. They didn't have as many wood choices. They did update them later, but this one's coming out of the gate. Sexy. A big one for Sonus Faber. Updated their most popular line. It's now called the Olympic Nova series. It goes all the way from 6,500 a pair up to the 16,500 a pair. But that is their most popular line. It's not their top tier. Also, it's not their budget line either. Not that they really have a super budget line, but it's right in the middle, kind of a little bit. It's one of their middle lines. Very popular. Moon by Sim Audio, the flagship 888, was announced at CES in 2017, but at Rocky Mountain, they had the 860A V2, 225 watts into 8 ohms, and an asking price of a cool $18K. I'll also take 2 of those, one for each channel. Now on the budget side more, hifi has a new Zen Blue Bluetooth receiver. Street price is estimated to be $129. There's also a Zen DAC on the same line, estimated to be at $149. Release dates for both products are estimated to be in October. And more recently, Vincent Audio, they have a new hybrid integrated amplifier this week, which lands on the somewhat audiophile modest side of pricing at a suggested retail price of $800, and it's called the SV200, tube stage and DAC section included. That is it for the news, but the biggest news...
News.
The biggest news, of course, I think, was the Abbey Road Super Deluxe version release on vinyl, and I guess the shocker for me was all the streaming options. And this is really like the first time there was a huge push. It was like high res was out there. It was really a topic of conversation online. And I will say, as we get into this, there were some negative feedback. I mean, as audiophiles, we like to chat about different things, different aspects, different things on how it sounds. Sure. I don't think anybody's arguing about the quality of the sound writing. Okay, the songs are awesome. No one's. If you're into the Beatles, this is one of the pinnacle albums. But you know, some were talking about the way it sounds. Some very.
Well, I have actual names here if you want to call some people out.
You do. So some of the complaints online were that it was a little bright. Was the word that was used? Bright. Right. Some people said the word bright and forward. I'm like, bright and forward. I mean, not bright maybe. How can something be too forward? I mean, maybe. If it's strident or crispy or aggressive. I didn't get any of that. No. So we're going to get into the sound a little bit more. But I will say that my general observation is that this sounded way better. And I'll get into those reasons why it sounded way better. But for my taste on how I like to hear music.
Yeah.
Bees, what was your general take?
I'm not going to say it was way better.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I listened to my old Abbey Road. I listened to it on vinyl, but that doesn't really count. So then I listened to like the CD that I bought when it first came out. So that would have been like late 90s or whatever, mid 90s. And then I listened to the streaming service, and it sounded better. I definitely liked it. I preferred it. Some of the songs can kind of sound like they were, especially Her Majesty, sound like it was recorded in a closet. And maybe that's just because it was an add-on at the end there. But it sounded I thought it sounded a lot better there. But overall, I didn't think there was like this massive jump from the CD that I had from the 90s to the high-end streaming that I was listening to. Now, that said, when I'm listening to the Beatles, it's all about the enjoyment of the Beatles for me. Sometimes I get lost in it. As a matter of fact, I had to do this whole listening thing quite a few times because I would just notice that I'm like, am I listening or am I just enjoying? And there is a difference in that. I definitely found myself enjoying it a lot more. But I'd love that they re-released it, and there's a whole new generation that's getting exposed to this album that hadn't been exposed to before.
I will say this, my observation about the way the vocals are presented, they're more aligned in a stereophonic field. There's less of this hardcore shift from right to left, and that also brings along a little more body with it. A little more body. I'm not saying all of a sudden we're revolutionary. But
I think we're actually in agreement on that. I just don't think that there was this massive jump. You know what I'm saying? I just don't think there's like this like it didn't sound so revolutionary to me from my old CD.
We're in the weeds. We're in the
weeds. You're
nitty-gritty.
right.
We're sitting
right.
there in a dimly lit basement with two speakers and a IKEA chair. And in that respect,
Right.
I would say the vocals are more clear. They brought along a little more body with that. Not a lot, but a little more.
Mm-hmm.
They're more defined and ever so slightly richer in nature. But this could also contribute to some people thinking it's brighter because all of a sudden the vocals are bigger and more. They are more, I wouldn't say forward, but when we listened to Here Comes the Sun, those backing vocals and his vocals are boom in the center, and the backing vocals too. They're bigger and more, you could say forward. But I would argue it's not that they're forward now, it's that they were kind of far back initially.
Yeah.
And a little more.
Giles brought him, he brought him to the forefront. So that's another big thing is that George Martin, the legendary Beatles producer, the fifth Beatles, they used to call him, who basically produced every Beatles album except for Let It Be. Giles, his son, is the one that produced this and remastered this and oversaw the whole process. And this is his third one. He did the White Album last year, and he did Sgt. Pepper's the year before for their 50th anniversaries. And the first time I heard Giles Martin's name was actually when the Beatles did a Cirque du Soleil in Vegas called Love. And I guess him and his father, George, who was still with us at the time, they sat down and reimagined a lot of this Beatles music for that show, which is an excellent soundtrack, which I feel like has been lost a little bit. But my point is that he is carrying on George and the Beatles' work quite marvelously, honestly. Flawlessly, actually.
And also, and just to go back to what we were talking about earlier, the technology wasn't quite as advanced as it is today. And so when they go back and do these kind of scrubs, I just really appreciate it. And you have to remember, they weren't working with perfection.
No, not
to
at all.
start with. So there's only so far they can take these things. But if you just kind of think about the singing in these, it's more focused, but it's also centered because they don't do the stereo swing as much. Now, they left that little thing in Her Majesty at the end.
No, it starts off that way. I listened to it on headphones. I listened to the Bear Dynamic headphones, so the stereo field I thought was. I'm really glad I did that because you really get to hear it. But you're right. From the beginning of Her Majesty, it comes from the far right, and it's constantly moving. Then it pans to the left, and then at the end, it kind of comes center and stays there, and then falls off to the right again, which is in the original vinyl. You'll hear it that way too. But I'd forgotten about it, quite honestly, and it was a little shocking when I heard it streaming through my headphones this time around.
So I think that it may be part of the disagreement online is that it's when you take something that you know and you love and you change it.
Yeah,
there's always going to be like that knee jerk. If someone moves something in my house, to a new spot or a new picture on the wall, my knee jerk reaction is like, I don't like it.
Yeah, you're Kathy Bates from Misery. Yeah.
And I just like
the penguins are.
And I think that's part of the nostalgia of the way it sounds, especially if you're an audiophile and
nostalgia,
you're really into
totally,
it. Just like
100%.
But I think
here's the but.
Yeah.
You're asking me, was I blown away by the remixes of the original album? And it was good, but it didn't blow me away. However, if someone were to ask me, would you buy this? I would say 100% yes, because there's 2 more CDs or whatever you want to call it of all these bonus tracks. And that's where I got real. I mean, I listened to the original Abbey Road tracks, I don't know, 3 or 4 times. But then for the next 6 hours, all I did was listen to all the new material, which some of it I had heard before. There's little bits that had come off on the anthology stuff, but nothing like this. It was pretty fantastic.
I did just want to read kind of the liner notes that I found online about something that had said about this particular project from Giles.
From Giles, yeah.
The goal of this project is not just to appeal to the Beatles obsessive, but also to recontextualize what the album means for a contemporary audience and to upgrade the sonic fidelity to match what they're used to hearing. One of the things we strive for in doing these mixes is so that people will listen to, say, Apple Music, and you can have a playlist or a radio station with the Beatles next to Ed Sheeran. I'm interested in seeing if you can switch someone from hearing to listening. Audiophiles listen to mixes, and people listen to songs. I would love younger generations or new listeners or people who weren't aware to go back and listen to the Beatles. They are the bedrock of popular music for so many people.
Yeah, so what out of all the extras, what stuck out in your mind? What did you enjoy?
The first thing I wrote down in my notes though was like, it seemed weird to hear Paul make a mistake. Now, when I say that, it's not that there's a plenty of like false starts in some of these outtakes, but at one point, and I'm maybe being too critical, he like and this only happens once, I'll say, in every extra, but there's one spot, and I can't even remember what track it's on, where he kind of misses a note a little bit.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, a mistake?
Yeah, I know. From the great Sir Paul. They have You Never Give Me Your Money, and in the title of the thing, it's called The 36th Take. Yeah. Like, you're like, oh my God, 36 takes of this. And that's not the only one. Matter of fact, when they slate it, he goes, okay, guys, come on, let's get serious. You're like, oh, I guess they weren't serious the first 35th times.
I think one of the fun parts about this is seeing how they work through songs in development. Yeah. What their writing process is like. There's this funny lyric I always kind of was curious about in She Came In Through the Bathroom Window, where he calls being a police officer a steady job.
Right.
And I was like, that's like kind of a weird word. In the outtake, it was actually proper job. And then now you can see like, oh man, maybe that's mean. Oh, like being a police officer is not a proper job. Let's just change it to steady. And it still was a little bit like, oh, it's such an interesting choice. Why'd they do that? Because it was a change.
Actually, the first track on the extras is my favorite, where they have "I Want You," "She's So Heavy," and John's laying down the vocals, and something comes in from the recording booth saying, "There's been a complaint that it's too loud." And then you come to find out they're not actually at Abbey Road. They're at Trident Studios, which is where they would have done Let It Be earlier in that year, which is in Soho, London. And I guess one of the neighbors complained. And I just, oh, wow, I thought we were beyond that. I thought we were in a recording studio and couldn't complain. And he literally is like, all right, well, the next one we'll do really, really loud, and then we'll be done with the loud ones. And at the end of it, you hear Billy Preston. Again, I don't think I knew that he was actually playing on this track, going absolutely berserk on the keyboards, and it's freaking awesome.
It's like so before rock and roll, isn't it? Oh, you're playing so loud. I'm like, what if a metal band was recording there? Did Black Sabbath play quiet in the studio?
No. I mean, and plus, She's So Heavy it's a heavy metal song, technically.
It's
like,
right
you can't
in the
play
title.
it soft. Yeah, it's right. She's So Heavy. They also had Paul's home demo of Goodbye, which is a song that someone else in the Apple artists released, which is actually something that I felt like it's a very kind of an old timey music hall sound, which I would have thought would have been fit more on the White Album with like Martha My Dear or something like that. So I'm actually glad that didn't make it onto Abbey Road.
For all the excitement of all the tracks and the heavy, there is 2 tracks right at the end that are just the orchestral takes from Something in Golden Slumber. I feel completely relaxing. It's like hearing it a fresh take on it, where you're just like, wow, you did a really good job, because that was arranged by Martin as well. And I just found it nice. It's like you don't hear the melody pounding away, but you just hear full sweet backing orchestra.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know that that's where George Martin came from. He came from the classical music world, so I think he kind of crushed those aspects of it, which get kind of lost. So I'm kind of glad that these tracks were put on the extras, because it's nice to be able to hear that. The other thing that I really loved was George Harrison's studio demo of Something. I mean, that song is so beautiful unto itself, and I guess they restored the piano parts to it, and it really gave it some emotional heft. And just I feel like there's no version of that song that doesn't sound good. You know what I'm saying? So to get to hear something that's still in its infancy was pretty nice.
Yeah, and there's a lot of that from his home studio that they kind of included into these outtakes, and it's all very raw and fun. And there's like people slapping, there's good banter. There's people slapping their knees and shaking things for percussion in the background. So there's this a sense of rawness to it. But dang, I gotta say it again. The songs are so incredible. It's like you hear this raw performance.
Right.
And it's recorded still pretty well. He must have had a nice studio.
I mean, it's whatever it is the top equipment they had at the time.
He had just gotten, I read this, he'd just gotten like a brand new Tascam dealy deal. So it's like, here we go. Technology is finally catching up with what these guys need to get the job done, right? And then there's just like slapping in the background. But the songwriting, you're like, how do they do this? That's what I always think. I'm like, how do you come forward with a song like so melodic, so well parsed out, like with theme and feeling and a collective sense of songwriting. It's raw in its execution only.
Yeah. Well, it's not easy because
complex.
everyone would be the Beatles if they were. I mean, that's why they're.
And what happened after this? It's like, I'm not saying there hasn't been good songwriting. I'm just saying even the individual members after this album couldn't. Yeah. They had some good songs. They had some great songs, but it wasn't quite the same as Abbey Road. There was never another Abbey Road after Abbey Road.
Nope, that's it.
The gas was out of the tank. No, just kidding. Paul Wings had some great stuff, and I like that.
Yeah, but it just shows like that they came together and they push each other in certain ways.
Right.
The other thing is that like there's the myth always was that they came off the Let It Be sessions and they were just completely disillusioned. They tried to make a movie while they were recording it, and Yoko was on the scene, and Linda McCartney was on the scene, and George Martin was not on the scene. I think Phil Spector produced that album. It was a disaster, right? And they abandoned the album, and they brought George Martin back, and they were like, let's just make an album like we used to, where we all get in a room and we just make beautiful music. And we put all the crap aside, and they did. And I feel that that's why this is their masterwork. Let It Be came out after this, technically, but this was recorded after. This is the last thing the Beatles sat down and did together as a group. And you can hear it. You can hear the love in it. And literally it ends with, besides the little add-on of Her Majesty, you know, with the famous line of, in the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make. And, I mean, can you have a better sign-off than that? I don't think so. Now, here's something crazy. So last night I'm watching On Demand, and the Beatles was just in the ether because yesterday, the movie that came out this summer, you know, the Danny Boyle movie, and it's excellent. The world has like this a power outage, and this guy is like the only guy in the world that knows all the Beatles tracks. He records them almost in kind of order of initial release, so you get to see the entire Beatles catalog come to life, and all of his friends are hearing it for the first time, and his parents are hearing it. My point of bringing that up is that movie did very well, and now this album, like it's raging to the top of the charts, right?
Yeah, I think that it actually hit number 1 in the UK and top 3 in the Billboard charts in the US. So there is still plenty of love out there for good, well-written, iconic
for the Beatles,
music.
100%. And I feel like this generation is embracing it, so which makes me very happy. So I definitely play a lot of Beatles for my little girl, so they'll definitely know who they are.
It'll be Lady Gaga and the Beatles.
Yeah, pretty much. That's it. Yep. And Baby Shark.
Here we go, on with the show. Today's interview, Jeff Joseph of Joseph Audio. Bees?
Punch it, Chewy.
Thanks for joining today, Jess. Oh, my. Thanks for joining today, Jeff Joseph.
Yeah, I like the other name better.
Yeah. And the longest elevator ride ever known to man. We just rode down the elevator together, and like from 15, stopping at every floor along the way. Then at floor 3, it like there were so many people in the elevator, it jiggled up and down. It jiggled up and down, and then decided to go back up to the 15th, stopping at every level, then back down to the first. I didn't even think we were going to make it.
Just a step shy of the Wonka factory elevator.
There were buttons covering every inch, and it was glass. That was really weird. I don't know how that happened.
Yeah.
And then my
elevator U-turn.
My favorite part was that we were both wedged in the very far back, right? And then there's this guy who really wanted to meet. Sounded like a sweet guy, but he really wanted to meet Steve Guttenberg,
right?
And he saw our dear friend, your dear friend, my acquaintance Herb
Reichert,
Herb Reichert, and he's like, "Hey, are you going? Have you seen Steve Guttenberg?" And Herb was like, "Yeah, I'm actually going to meet him." He's like, "Can I come along?"
Yes.
And God bless his soul, Herb was like, "Are you going to only take a little bit, like a minute of his time.
Yeah.
And the guy was like, yeah. He's like, okay, I'll take you to him.
Well, yeah. And I think secretly Herb was maybe just a little disappointed that he doesn't have his own audio reviewer stalker.
Oh, man.
Instead, he has to bring Steve's.
It was a little bit of disappointment.
Right.
But I'm right here.
Because he seemed to be like giving out their addresses. Yeah. He's like, yeah. Oh, he lives by the park.
He does. I believe the follow-up sentence was, so, hey, where does he live? And I was like, wow, he's just going for it. He's going for it.
Yes.
Yeah, well, Steve beckons that kind of adoration in all parts of the world. So good for him. But this is not about Steve.
Right.
This is about you.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Jeff Joseph of Joseph Audio and their magnificent speakers. I'm just going to say it out front. Well, that's going to be like the starting point. And you can tell because on our long walk to the room where we're doing this podcast, it was like I was with a celebrity. It was nonstop. Everybody smiling, high fives. There was like fanfare. I'm making that last part up, but there was a lot of adoration for you.
I didn't hear
that. So tell me, how did it all begin?
Well, all right. So how did Joseph Audio? How did I start working in an audio business, or I mean, how far back are we going?
I like to
here?
go and back. My listeners will know this, but I like to go back to the beginning. Where were you born?
I was born in Tarrytown, New York.
Oh, I like the sound of that name, Tarrytown.
Tarrytown, and I grew up in White Plains in Westchester County, up in New York. Yeah,
cool.
Yeah.
Did your parents have any influence over your love of music?
Oh, sure. No, I remember my dad listening to the Metropolitan Opera broadcasts on Saturday. Usually waking up to those, and he had quite an interest in music, and my uncle actually had done speakers in the 1950s.
What?
Yeah. There was a company called Robbins Joseph, RJ, and they invented a speaker enclosure that provided some resistance to the motion of the woofer by kind of wrapping the air pressure from inside the cabinet around to the face of the speaker, kind of pressing it on its edges. Interestingly enough, there's even a test of that speaker enclosure done by the BBC, which I'm not sure, I've never heard mention of it, but it's out there on the internet if you search.
So legacy.
Yeah.
In a legacy that lasts very long in each cycle. Mm-hmm. That's awesome. I love that. And so, did that inspire you then? Do you have a double E? Where kind of did you go? What the college and the education?
No, I actually attended SUNY Binghamton. Mm-hmm. Or now it's Binghamton University.
Oh, okay.
But no, I don't have an engineering degree. After I left college, I went to work for a hi-fi store in New York City, and that was Harvey Electronics.
Oh, wow.
In Manhattan.
I have to ask, because I do this quite a bit, and there are quite a bit of people who have worked at hi-fi. Have you worked with anybody else in that store who is still in the industry today?
Let me think.
Because if you're familiar with the Gutenberg story,
oh yeah,
he worked at Sounds by Singer, I think.
Yeah, Sound by Singer.
Sound by Singer, and
right.
Many people made their way through there, including, I believe,
Mike Trey
and John DeVore.
Oh yeah,
I think he worked there.
I don't remember if he did,
but for sure,
perhaps he did.
Andy Regan, who we interviewed, worked there.
Andy's worked in many places. Yes.
He has. And he also claims that Steve Gutenberg, who worked there, saved his life at one point. Or no, Steve Gutenberg claims that Andy saved his life from falling boxes in the back or something. So
yes.
Oh, you heard this story too?
I think I heard this story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll have to have him on to tell it. I only get it secondhand.
I thought I heard the story about Steve, like almost falling over in a theater or something like that. I think Steve's had some near misses. Maybe he would like to elaborate on that.
Yeah.
But he's not here.
He's not here. Well,
I'm here.
Maybe his ears are burning as we talk. So You worked at the retail store.
Yeah.
It was a pleasurable experience for you?
Yeah. Well, my very first audio store job was when I was in high school. And I would go and work part-time at a store in White Plains. Mm-hmm. I think the very, very first store that hired me was Tech Hi-Fi.
Okay.
And the manager there, that was a very short employment. I don't think I lasted the day.
Oh, no.
See, I thought I was going there to become a salesman.
Uh-huh.
The manager thought I was there to unload the truck.
Oh.
So there was this creative differences that kind of got in the way there. So after that, I went to work for a place called East Coast Stereo that was on Main Street in White Plains. And my earliest hi-fi memories actually go back to when my dad was shopping for stereo equipment, because my uncle, the one who had done the RJ enclosure, actually became an engineering sales representative. And he, in one of the companies he'd represented was CTS, which is a driver supplier. And one of his clients was Ohm Acoustics in Brooklyn. And through those connections, we ended up, we went upgraded from a pair of KLH 17s, bookshelf speakers from the 60s. My dad bought at Lafayette, to a pair of Ohm Fs, which is kind of a radical jump, because suddenly you have a speaker that really needs 200 watt per channel amp, and you could blow them if you put 201 watts into it. Well, that was the joke anyway. But it was a really interesting design, because it was a speaker that it had the Walsh driver, and which is this funny sort of inverted cone, but it had different sections. The top one was titanium, aluminum, so forth. So this kind of spurred things on, in my formative years, you could say. And then suddenly we had these speakers. Although I have to say, we had a very large living room, and one of the oddities is that Dad put them in each corner of our very long living room. And I remember one day I actually pulled them out of the corners and placed them sort of flanking the fireplace to kind of show him, how they actually could sound, which he kind of sat there, he listened patiently and said, "Okay, put them back."
Oh, no.
Yeah. So there was that. My early memory then is Dad going to the audio experts in White Plains. The owners were Frank and Eddie Elau. Oh, actually, not brothers. I'm sorry. Was it Frank Elau and Eddie Adler, I think? So I would go there, and I was a young child at that point, and Frank would pinch my cheeks, like that, which was kind of weird.
Disrespectful.
Yeah. And there was this really interesting repair guy. There was a service department in the back of the audio experts. And there was this kind of long-haired hippie, very skinny guy working there named Peter Letterman. There was a point where my brother had a Sony reel-to-reel, and something went wrong with it. I don't recall what, but I thought I could probably take a crack at fixing it before he found out that it wasn't working. And so I opened it up and kind of poked around inside, and totally failed in any attempt to repair this. So ended up bringing it to the audio experts and to Peter Letterman. And I don't know if have you encountered Peter? Peter's now famous as the cartridge expert at Soundsmith.
Oh, okay, Soundsmith, yeah.
Yes, okay. So Peter has this very deep voice, and he looked at this tape deck, and he looked at me very with a kind of a penetrating stare and said, "Now tell me, Jeff, have you been inside this machine?" So
you knew right away. You
Yeah.
knew right away
Oh.
something was amiss.
And I said, no, of course not. What do you mean? And he says, well, the way I can tell that you're lying is that the heads of these screws are stripped. He took mercy on me, and
good.
he said, ordinarily I do not accept units that have been worked on by other people.
Okay.
Which you can understand, because while I was, tinkering inside, I probably could have caused much more harm to it than the initial problem. So anyway, he took pity on me and fixed the machine. And eventually, I ended up going to Peter's house for electronics lessons. So that was a source of education for me.
That's cool.
Early on, and in learning how to, we repaired an Advent cassette deck and moved on to adapting a Pioneer receiver I had, giving it not only rebuilding its output stage, but also installing preamp outputs so I could later soup it up with an external power amplifier.
Oh, there you go.
And all sorts of fun stuff like that. So
When did you start to make your way towards
speakerdom. Well, okay.
Speakerdom.
So, time passes. I worked in a few different stores, ending up at Harvey Electronics in New York City.
Wait, how many? During what time? What year is this? I feel like there were so many stores in New York.
Well, they weren't in New York City. Harvey was the only one in New York City that I worked at.
Okay.
These were up in Westchester.
Mm-hmm.
I worked for Westchester Stereo, which is primarily a car stereo store. I tried selling what little hi-fi stuff they had, including a receiver. I'm not going to name the brand.
The listeners will know I worked at Circuit City selling audio. So
there you go.
Beat that. That was pretty much bottom of the barrel.
Well, this was a different experience. There was this highly reviewed receiver that we had there. It really sounded very good. It was a nice sounding receiver, but it had serious design flaws and manufacturing flaws, and it just wouldn't keep working, and so it would lose its presets on the radio, or it would develop some odd noise, particularly in the tuner section. So there were different colored dots that they installed on the back, so you know which repairs it had and which ones it hadn't.
That's funny.
Yeah. Anyway, that was that store at Westchester Stereo. East Coast Stereo, I told you a little bit about. That was my first, time selling audio.
Okay.
And that was back in 1979.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what was the scene like back in New York in '79?
Well,
I mean, because it was kind of a heyday for a lot of music, for a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, from my point of view, to me, it was exciting to be in an audio store and making suggestions to people about what they ought to buy. Before I learned much more about selling and actually listening to the customer and trying to identify what it is that they want as opposed to what I think they should want, which is kind of a little difficult concept to grasp when you're in high school. While I was in college, I worked for a store up there called Gordon Electronics. And while I was working there, I encountered an engineer from IBM. And he told me about these amazing loudspeakers that were made by a former Macintosh engineer. And you could only buy them at one place down in New York City, which turned out not to be Harvey. It was actually Leonard Radio. But by this time, he had stopped making them himself and had licensed them to another company, which was at Harvey. So there were these infinite slope speakers.
Okay.
Finally got there. Whew! That was a long journey with excessive detail. Yes. So
Infinite slope.
Yeah, the JSE infinite slope speakers. And my memory is that these speakers really outperformed everything that was on the floor at Harvey. They were really ahead of their time. They used really high quality parts, as far as the drivers especially. Maybe the cabinetry not so great, but from that time period, it was really something remarkable, and they became a big sales success there. They sold through quite a few of them. The company was having a difficult time supplying.
Interesting.
That was so they had a lot of turns on that. And that's how I actually met Rich Modafferi, who's the inventor of this infinite slope crossover. Harvey was a very big Macintosh dealer. One of the disappointments that Macintosh had was that their speakers never sold well. I don't know about today, but we're talking back in 1983. At that point in time, if you were a Macintosh dealer, you were required to have them on the sales floor, but you
We're never gonna
rarely sold them.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And that's something I think that bothered Macintosh. And meanwhile, these JSE Infinite Slope speakers were doing pretty well, and they were kind of taking off. We were invited up to Binghamton for a factory tour. I went to...
That's where I know. You said Binghamton, and I'm like, I know that city. Why know that city? It's
Yeah,
where Macintosh is from.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. And I went to school in Binghamton as well. And that's where I met this guy, Bill, who was the IBM engineer. Because there's a whole, that's where IBM started as well. It's in Endicott, Bristol, thereabouts. So, yeah.
IBM. I mean, that's a name from my childhood. We had an IBM computer.
So, yes, go up to Binghamton. We get the factory tour. It's a great tour. I mean, we go through and we see they have a wave soldering machine, and people who do assembly work on. We watched things being made or things that were partially made, and then we go to the acoustics laboratory where they have an anechoic chamber and they have a reverberant room.
Always fun.
And then
and you didn't go crazy because there's that myth that if you go into an anechoic chamber, have you heard that one?
It was a peculiar sensation.
Oh, what? It's not all hooey, huh?
Oh, no. I mean, it really sounds like when someone's talking to you in an anechoic chamber, it's like almost like it's coming like through a straw directly to you. It's so finely focused. It's really peculiar to hear it without reverberation. So definitely. So after the anechoic chamber and all that fun, we end up in a listening room. And the listening room has curtains in the front, so you can't see what's playing.
Yep.
So they had us listen to a couple of pairs of speakers, and they wanted to know which ones we liked.
Oh, boy.
Well, it didn't go the way. It was just another disappointment for them. It didn't go the way that they had hoped. And it turned out that they had acquired a pair of infinite slope speakers and put them against their newest and proudest design. So
Are you saying that you chose the infinite slope in a blind
not
test?
just me. There were a number of us who preferred the infinite slope speakers.
Okay.
Not knowing that we were preferring them as a name, just preferring the sound, having been maybe attuned to the special qualities that crossover permits. So, me being young and inexperienced, I said to the then president, Gordon Gow, I said, well, don't worry, Gordon. We're going to sell a lot of Macintosh amplifiers with those infinite slope speakers. Yeah, it wasn't exactly what he was hoping to hear either. And he seemed to be perfectly fine with it until I got into his car with one other salesman there, and he went into a tirade. He went on to do a tirade saying that this infinite slope thing isn't real, that the speaker doesn't have 100 dB per octave crossover slope, and blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, what did you... He said, we measured them, and they didn't do that. And I said, oh, well, what did they do? Oh, it was like 3 dB per octave, he said. And I kind of thought, really? 3? Doesn't really make much sense, does it? So anyway, by the time we arrived at the restaurant, the good old Vestal Steakhouse, he had completely calmed down and become charming and polite again.
He wanted like a second alone with you to set the record straight, and then he's like, oh, we're here now. Everything's fine.
Yeah. He was.
He just needed to vent. He just needed to vent.
Yeah. It was. Well, I don't know. It was an unusual experience, and as a matter of fact, on that trip, I was planning to visit Richard Modafferi, and I went over to, because he lives in Vestal. So I went over to Richard and told him the story about what Gordon had said. And Richard kind of very calmly went over to his bookshelf and pulled down one of these composition notebooks that he records all of his work in. And I don't know how, but he eventually found the volume where he discovered the infinite slope crossover, and he had written in block letters, "Eureka," which is very Richard. But it was real, and he had actually applied for and eventually received a patent on it.
That's cool.
So after all that fun, years go by, the pages falling off a calendar. We move into the future.
I'll do the sound effects.
Very nice.
They're very rapidly falling off.
Wow.
The months,
yes,
years are flying by.
Years go by, and as time progresses, JSE has a harder time keeping up with the orders from Harvey, and things start deteriorating. And then, meanwhile, I had become, a store manager. I managed the Paramus store in New Jersey, and then went on to become like the sales trainer and wrote catalog copy and so forth for Harvey. And every so often the phone would ring, and it would be Richard, and he would ask that I talk to somebody about the experience of selling infinite slope speakers. And I had gotten into this office, and I'd kind of gotten this feeling about Harvey, which was because I had worked most of the time in the New York City store, and we had a certain point of view about all the other stores. Mm-hmm. And then I managed one of the other stores, and then I had we all had a point of view about the New York store and the other stores, and I realized it was kind of this very disjointed operation, that there was very little cohesion between the different parts. And here I was in the executive office, and it wasn't a very happy place. So one time when Richard called me, I said, I think this is something I'd like to do. And I had some ideas as to what we could do, taking this technology, applying it to, the advances in drivers that had happened over the years. So we actually did a deal, and Richard engineered the original Joseph Audio speakers. We worked on voicing them together.
He let you have the name, huh? He didn't want the name?
Well, he wasn't concerned with having the name, and actually the models that I had were RM, so that's how I got his name in on it. Because the problem we had with putting Modafferi, at least my thought about it, was putting the Modafferi name on it, is that people would often mispronounce it. They would call him Montefiore.
Montefiore.
Yes, they were more familiar with that name. So it was often the case they would just not come out right. So and I actually was trying to come up with a lot of clever names for speaker company, and Joseph Audio was sort of a last resort, because in those days, if you wanted to find out if there was trademarks registered, I think it was Thompson & Thompson, you would pay them to do a trademark search to make sure the name was clear, and all the names that I thought were clever were gone. So
it's strange. When I hear Joseph Audio, I just feel like it has a decent ring. To me, it feels kind. Joseph Audio.
Yeah, well,
What? It's not.
I don't
it's
know.
not
There was a
overtly
dealer
aggressive?
who told my sales rep that, what this is this Joseph Audio thing. It's first name.
Yeah.
It's a first name. It's not a last name. Yeah.
You're like, sorry, sir, you're incorrect. You want to see proof?
Yeah. Well,
It is a first name, but still Joseph is unoffensive to me.
it has. I don't think it's been an obstacle. So
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you pulled, years of consumer research before you made the final decision, right?
no, no. This was sort of like
I pulled
can't-
five. It was a
I've
data
done enough-
set of 5,
I did
and that's
enough
all I needed.
Yeah, I did enough trademark searches, and that was.
I love how I said,
This, I did the last one was on Joseph Audio. I was like, oh, that's clear. Whew.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Get a logo fired up, people. I'm ready. Joseph Audio, here we come.
Yeah.
So that was what year?
1991.
So we still got some time in this tale. What happened after 91?
Oh my God. I don't know. It's like
We're
I've
just
woken
like,
up in a time.
The whole chapter just rips off the wall, and then it
That's
lands on 2019.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
How many models have
hard.
you made since then?
Well, let's see. RM20, RM7, RM22, RM25, RM30, RM50, RM33, RM55, Pearl 2.
He's running out of fingers, folks. You can't see. He had to go back 12 or so?
I would say there's 15 to 20
Wow.
models.
So 90, and we're in the 20s, so 30. So you, on average, do about a new model every 2 years then? Or
Well,
did you do
would-
more eventually or more later?
I think there were more initially, but no, I guess. Well, I don't know. I haven't thought of it in terms of, the life cycle of a speaker is much longer than a DAC or something like that.
Wow.
Right?
You just took like the two polar opposite things.
I was going for contrast.
Yeah, that's good contrast.
Yeah. So,
Okay, so one of the things that people say in that regard is that they like to have something new because they want something new to talk about, and that they like short life product cycles because it drives the messaging. Boom, boom, boom. Are you saying that's not necessarily a given for your particular environment?
I would say that there is some marketing validity to that.
Mm-hmm.
To constantly having new things to talk about, and right now it's a unique time because I'm introducing 2 new speakers, within a very short space of time. It is nice to be able to wave my arms over there and kind of go, there they are. They're new, first time anywhere.
And those speakers are?
Well, at this event, they're the Perspective 2 Graphene.
Yeah.
Those are. They're being played for the first time at this show, the AXPONA show, here in not quite Chicago, almost Chicago.
It's a little out there. Not quite Chicago, because if you want to go to Chicago downtown, it's a bit of a cab ride. But also the Pulsar Graphene 2s. Is that new or no?
Yes, the Pulsar Graphene 2.
Is that the second
sorry,
speaker?
Pulsar 2 Graphene.
My apologies.
Get the order right.
It is not Audio Joseph. It is Joseph Audio, sir.
See,
It's
now
so simple. It's a first person's name.
Why didn't I think of doing Audio Joseph? That seems like
Audio Joseph. The 2 new speakers you were talking about is the Perspective 2 Graphene.
The Perspective 2 Graphene and the Pulsar 2 Graphene. Yes.
So generally, you release the floor standard in the book. What would you call it? A floor? What do you call the smaller size in your mind? It's not a bookshelf.
It's a mini monitor.
Mini monitor.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
Do they usually come out? You don't launch them consecutively, like size A, size B?
No, but because they both share this woofer, it made sense to do them, one with the other. And it's sort of like, well, hey, that really worked nicely over here. Can't wait to try it over there. It's like, okay, and it also, things. It's been a long time since the Pulsar was designed in 2009. It's been 10 years.
Did you get a lot of good sales out of that speaker?
That is our best-selling speaker. So
I love that speaker. Listen, when I first started doing this, I heard that thing in a couple setups, and each time I was like, what in the hell is this? It just, for me, and I'm not trying to, go too gaga, and I generally keep my opinions to myself in the podcast. You can find my opinions all over the web. Just search for them.
Mm-hmm.
In the podcast, listen, this speaker, it just sounds like so full for its size. It's not like I've heard giant speakers sound giant, but that's like cheating. These things, they just had like a nice tonality with a bunch of different setups. It's like, oh, I heard those again. Why they sounded so good? And so, from my perspective, they've always been a landmark. And the fact that you're saying that they've lasted this long and it's been your bestseller for this long without an update, I think speaks quite a bit, because that is a heck of a product cycle. 10 years in this business, that's like forever. It's like John Atkinson forever.
I think with people's expectations,
Mm-hmm.
the Pulsar always exceeds people's expectations, because they see it and they see the size of it and they think it's that looks harmless. It doesn't look like it's going to sound like a big speaker.
Yeah.
And there's always a fascination with that. It's like, how did that happen? And one of my favorite things to play on that speaker is to put on a really powerful pipe organ track. And man, there are times when that thing can really just defy, what you're seeing, sonically what you're hearing. There's a disconnect there somehow. And that's always fun. It's fun to share that with people at shows. So
let's just do a quick technical dive. So on that particular one, let's stick with the Pulsar since we're on that subject. Have you dabbled with different material usage over the years, or have you stuck with one for the drivers? What do you like?
Well, when it came time to develop it, because this is something, this has been a long-standing request before it actually became real, was to have a speaker like this that was small. And, because from a marketing point of view, mini monitors are a lot of fun. And one of the cool things about, like, if you have a big pair of speakers in your home, you're going to have that big pair of speakers. Sure, there are exceptions, but most of the time you're going to have the big pair of speakers. And then if you find another big pair of speakers that you're going to, replace them with, then you're going to get rid of those and replace them with another big pair. Not so with the mini monitors. Mini monitors can be stashed away into closets or whatever.
There's a lot of truth to that.
So people have several sets of mini monitors, and they can be like different flavors. It doesn't have to. I mean, of course, it'd be great if they were all Joseph Audio Pulsars, and now you have two versions of it that you can stockpile.
So don't flood the aftermarket, people. You hear that? Keep the graphenes going. They just add them to your collection.
That's right. Yeah, you can have two pairs. You can compare them and have little shootouts between Pulsar and Pulsar.
No, but let's get back to what I said before. What was the original driver made out of?
Oh, well, there's some similarity. I mean, there's a lot of similarities between them. They're from the same supplier. They're made for us, to our specs by Seas in Norway. So they're
Norway.
Yeah,
interesting.
They're made in Norway. This is the company that does it. There are a number of Scandinavian speaker company or loudspeaker driver manufacturers, although I think that some of that is now been moved to the Far East.
Well, how much would the price increase go up if you had to make it all in the U.S.?
It would not be a price difference. It would be a performance hit.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You just feel like this Norway company does that good of a job?
They do.
Oh, well, I believe you, because I hear something good in it. That's really interesting.
Yeah, but that's why. I mean, it's not a matter of saving money. It's a matter of looking for the best and identifying what's the best. And I'm not trying to say a best in terms of mine is the best. I'm not. What I mean is, there are things that are important to me and important to my customers, and so best for that application. Yeah, we wanted a woofer that really could have the excursion, the control, and the articulation that would be, that would really convey the impression of hearing a large speaker from a compact enclosure.
So I'm still trying to get this out of you. What was the original material?
Oh, okay. So the diaphragm of that speaker is magnesium.
Magnesium.
It's
okay.
cast magnesium.
Okay.
Yes.
And is that material what makes it special in your mind? What makes the driver have to be made from Norway? What makes it magical?
Okay, the thing about speakers is it isn't the one thing that's going to make it magical. It's a combination of things. And again, it's about pursuing your vision of how it should sound or what you're trying to achieve. So, it's a cast magnesium cone, which is then it's not stamped. So there's a big difference there between that and other metal cone woofers.
Sure.
There's a big difference between that and a paper cone woofer, how you use it, and what type of crossover you'd want to use with it, and so forth. But going from the original pulsar woofer to the new one, the differences are that the magnesium is coated with a layer of graphene.
Okay.
The graphene is a very thin coating, but it's very stiff. And so it actually stiffens the cone, adds a little dampening to it. It also seals the magnesium. So the life expectancy of the driver is enhanced as well, which is kind of a nice bonus. But that's not where that's not the end of the changes between the new woofer and the old woofer. There's also a new voice coil former. It's titanium now. The voice coil itself is now aluminum sheathed in copper, replacing the copper one that was on the original. New suspension system. And the motor system has been optimized using finite element analysis. So it's a lot of work that went into.
How long was the R&D on it?
The R&D on it was 2 years.
Is that long for you or short for you?
That is long. That is long. And I have to say that it's the R&D that is done by Seas. It's one of the things that they are extremely good at is they are good speaker engineers. And that's my strength is in integrating them into a system with a crossover filter. Our proprietary crossover method.
That's interesting.
So to give them credit for the engineering work on this driver. They even invested in a climatic, one of those chambers where you can rack up pressure and temperature and, really put materials under stress and see how they hold up.
Wow.
So, again, it's nice to have sonic performance, but we also want longevity. We want people to enjoy their speakers for a long period of time without any change in performance or failures.
Also beautiful. The speakers are beautiful. The phase plug. Is it a solid copper phase plug?
It is.
Yeah. It's also beautiful. It kind of looks like a cool bullet. I'm just going to say it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I just saw a video by our previously mentioned Steve Gutenberg, who said he did a video on, does a three-way sound better than a two-way? And he proposed, not all, but some, that the simplicity of a two-way somehow, when you take out one of the crossovers to make it happen, that the simplicity gives a little more cohesion to the sound. Do you find that to be true, and is that why it's a two-way?
Cohesion is a big issue.
I just use that word to describe it, but better sound is also a good adjective. Does two ways just inherently have better sound than three ways?
No, it doesn't have inherently better sound than a three-way. However, when you're building a pair of speakers and you have a certain budget to work with, and your job as a designer is to spend the customer's money wisely.
Yeah.
So you have, let's say your budget increases now. You have a pretty good two-way speaker, and now you can make a more expensive speaker. So in one case, you can buy better quality speaker elements. You can invest in better quality crossovers, better cabinet, and then you have a better two-way speaker for whatever that budget is. Or we could take our pretty good tweeter, our pretty good woofer, and put a pretty good mid-range in there and put a, more crossover that way. And then you'd have a pretty good three-way speaker. So I think the one...
So it's just, you're proposing it's just limiting the parts increases the overall value, that alone, right?
Well, again, looking at it on a per dollar basis.
Yeah.
Right. If there's a budget limitation. However, if you can execute with the same level of quality, it's trickier to do three ways. But, there's some real benefits to doing a three-way design compared to a two-way, especially if you want to go, louder. If there's a number of things when you're doing a three-way speaker, you can optimize the mid-range for its job, as opposed to thinking about, well, I want excursion for the bass, because you're not going to make it do excursion. You're going to make it do higher frequencies that it doesn't need to travel as much. So there's some benefits there. So it's tough to generalize like that. And Steve is kind of becoming the Alex Jones of audio.
Brought it up for a sense of, to start the conversation. I don't think that his conclusion at the end of the video was that simplistic either.
No,
he wouldn't do that.
No, Steve knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
He is the agent provocateur.
Yes.
That is what he's doing.
Before he launched the channel, he was asking so many questions online. Like, he was starting to stir the machine, but he thinks a lot about audio. He just to think up a new question every single day just seems quite daunting.
It is.
Regardless of what you create in life. I'm like, what, a question every day is a lot of days, a lot of questions.
He seems obsessed.
I don't know. He's, I mean, are we all a little obsessed? And it's
what do you mean?
It's just sound. You hear it every day, Jeff.
Yeah.
I mean,
I guess it's good enough. You should just stop.
I can play it from my phone. It's pretty easy.
Yeah, that's the problem, is that, music is so accessible now. It's everywhere. It's like, it's even places where you don't want it.
Yeah.
It's always going. And then, the thing about streaming, which is amazing, is like, what do I want to hear?
Man, it's true. I am guilty of staring at the search bar with a completely blank mind. At least the radio had curation. I look at that search bar sometimes and like, oh my God, why can't I think of anything?
Yeah.
What do I want to listen to?
If you think, I bet if they looked at the amount of stuff that you stream as opposed to what you could be, the library, you're probably working within a very narrow slice of the content. Even if you're like, oh, this is new, I'll try that. I've done that from time to time. But
as you've gotten older, do you think that you've been drawn to just enjoying silence more? Given your profession, this is a job, right? Do you enjoy silence more?
At the end of the show day,
yeah, I hear that.
I can imagine, just not playing something is good. But
okay, so since we breached that bridge, what do you think of the repetition of the music that gets played at audio shows? Do you partake? I understand completely if the answer is yes, because you want your sound system to sound the very best it can. I do not fault dealers for that, but you still have a choice to make. Do I play Keith Don't Go, or do I play something else? Because generally, I've never heard Keith Don't Go in your room, but has it been played?
Yeah.
What about DK, Diana Krall? Has she ever been played?
She actually does a very good version of Keith Don't Go. I don't know if you've heard that.
No. They double up and double down. Oh my gosh. Are you serious?
No, I'm not serious.
Because I was like about to pull my phone out.
Well, okay. Those of us who do demonstrations at shows, will get tired of the things that we're playing. And I think that we should look at it from the point of view of the people who are coming to the shows to experience our equipment. And if they enjoy Diana Krall, I'm not going to be the musical snob that kind of goes, not playing that. I'll play whatever people want to hear on the system, and particularly if it illustrates something, it gives them a further understanding of what it is that what's the unique proposition of what I am offering them, the experience that I'm offering them, because that's the bottom line, and I'm not there to pass judgment.
So that being said, what is the strangest request you've ever? What's the weirdest thing you've ever?
Oh my God, I've had incredibly strange. I have a photo somewhere of this man who brought in some sort of, I believe it was some sort of Eastern European punk rock record. Completely strange. Or no, it wasn't punk rock. It was Eastern European, but maybe more like 60s era rock. Never encountered that music before or since.
My strangest experience, I'll just tell you, going into the zoo room, Sean Casey, wonderful guy.
Right.
Very eccentric taste in music. I went in one time. I'll never forget this. I'm sorry. It makes me laugh just thinking about it. He was playing a track that was so obscure and different. At the point which I entered the room, it was just heavy breathing.
Oh, okay.
just like, that was it. And it lasted for so long that I entered and left. It never changed. It was just heavy breathing.
Yeah. Well, you see, I think that may be a sign of burnout, maybe. I mean, I'm trying to understand.
The thing is they DJ, and he has interesting taste, but sometimes he just wants to be this eccentric brand.
Right.
I totally can see that. In this space, that is a brand move, I think, just from a marketing perspective.
Maybe so.
But he plays whatever he wants. He is not a snob either. You don't have to listen to the breathing thing. He just happened to be playing that when I walked in.
See, here's the thing, though. It shouldn't be focused on, is it me focused? Is it is it all about me and my brand, or is it about the customer who's here to learn something, to hear something, to get excited about something?
I don't think, and I cannot speak for Sean Casey, but I can only imagine that he will play your music, and he plays all sorts of music.
Sure.
It's just that the fringes of what he's willing to play on his system tend to be a bit wider, I think.
Oh, well.
That's all.
I'm pretty flexible about what I play. I even played the Norman Luboff Choir at a show.
Are they not good?
A mono recording from the late 40s, early 50s. It's not the type of music that most people can relate to now. Very popular in their day, but not so much now. There's just people connect to music in many different ways, and there's really, the more I listen, the more there are facets to things that I can appreciate, even if they're, some of us will go, well, I've heard that a million times. There's all stuff we've heard a lot. I'm willing to play it, although I may search for what I think is the coolest version of it.
Yeah, for me, it's the Hotel California Hell Freezes Over track. I don't know why I can't escape it. Although, and I guess for me, the problem is, believe it or not, it was the demo track for when I worked at Circuit City.
Oh, God.
So I heard it every single day. And then I come here, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's the same track. And now I've heard it so many times, I'm just like, well, good. And I liked it the first time I heard it. I thought it was better than the original when they redid it acoustically. I'm like, this is absolutely brilliant. But
I've got this playing in my head now, so thanks for that.
The little flamenco start. Yes. But you have to admit, the way they mic'd it, the sound is great. The bass is good. You know what I mean? It's like
Sorry.
Yeah. It's done up. It's done up. But they had money now.
I remember enjoying it at the time, back in the early 90s. It's not something I would want to play now, but
that's interesting.
There's so much.
Have you played it yet this show?
No.
That's good.
Haven't come near it.
Have you played Diana Krall yet? Just out of curiosity.
No.
Ooh. Did you play Keith Don't Go yet?
No.
Whoa.
No, but here's the thing too. I'm not consistent. So
Okay.
I'm often focused on, thinking about looking at the group of people, because the dynamics are always kind of fun, shows. You can play with that a little. And I'm kind of thinking, all right, what would these guys like to hear? What would they enjoy? Or maybe what's something new that I can turn them on to, but that's in their lane that they will like. And that to me is the most fun, is kind of sharing music. And people come to me and say, okay, they've got a list of stuff, and that's really cool too. I actually a lot of the stuff that's on my playlist, things that people brought to me.
Yeah, it's
at
fun.
Shows.
That part is really fun. So look at me deep in the eyes and tell me what track would you play for me from your current set list?
Okay. Well, I think I would probably play you Spangle.
Spangle.
Have you heard Spangle?
I feel like I might have at some point.
Yeah.
What kind of music is it?
It's electronica.
Okay.
So I think you probably enjoy Spangle. It's got some really clever production to it, and it's unbelievably powerful sounding. The bass sounds in it and textures of it are really, really sophisticated. So yeah, I'd probably throw that your way.
I like that. I as much as don't listen to electronic music on a daily basis, there is something I feel like on a high-end system with the spatial cues. So just the way it's like doody 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 doody, like left and right, and it's so crisp in those positions. And a lot of the music is like rapid fire left and right stereo sometimes, and it's not just like this wall of sound. You have like these sparkles and these pinpoints that jump all around. I appreciate the electronic music and a really high-end audio system for that reason alone, because it's kind of a fun listen when it's just like bouncing around. Mm-hmm. It's not a wall of sound like a AC/DC guitar mishmash, but it's a fun listen. And of course, they play with the bass like you could imagine.
And it's kind of a hyper reality. It's not necessarily, and although. When I do presentations, what I like to do is I like to, to try to check all the boxes, so to speak, right? So, like, you've got the electronica, maybe that checks off the dynamics and the spatial cues that you're talking about. But there's also recordings that have a very convincing sense of space and ambience, maybe simply recorded or sound like they're simply recorded, but artfully recorded so as to convey a slice of the original acoustic, and having that come out is really impressive. And then there's some performances that are just so powerful emotionally that I'm thinking of Nina Simone, for example. There's a few pieces like that which it's rare that you can get to them at a show, but when you can and the audience is kind of going along for the ride, those are great moments. So that's really nice. Again, we're kind of connecting through music, and I think that is the thing that brings this whole group together. That's and so we might snicker at the we'll play Keith Don't Go. Here's a little Dire Straits. There you go.
Only people from Jersey apparently request those songs.
I guess they do.
Hey,
I don't know what
go
that
get your
voice is
shine
coming
box.
from.
Your shine box filled with records from Dire Straits.
Hey, don't mess with the Mark Knopfler. He's a genius.
You got the boss in there.
And so let's say someone comes in and they want to hear Bruce Springsteen. Which Bruce Springsteen do you play? Right? That's a broad choice.
He's got a lot.
Or Elvis Costello. I'm a big fan of Elvis Costello. But which Elvis Costello? Are we talking the Elvis Costello crooner with Burt Bacharach? Or the young punk Elvis Costello and the country Elvis Costello?
Do you want to say anything on the way out?
Thanks for having me. I never done anything like this before, and it was kind of fun.
It was fun having you on. I appreciate you taking the time. I know you're a busy guy.
Yeah.